Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Health Hub, episode 6. So we're roaring along, like I said once before, and those who said it just wouldn't last, well, you pay, you get what you get. Anyway, my name is Gary Borman. I'm a degree qualified naturopath. I've been in clinical practice for around about 14 years now. So the whole idea of the Health Hub is to share with you experience that I might have gained across some of the various dietary aspects that get around in the mainstream press, and give you some guidelines on what might be hype in the news, good stuff on diet, nutrition, lifestyle, and just try to make your life and that of your friends and family just that little bit healthier and happier. So as we always have to start each program, this is the general disclaimer. The following segment should be considered as information, education and entertainment only. It is not designed to replace professional, individualised recommendations, nor does it recommend or infer ceasing prescription medications. If the information presented here causes concerns about your current health regime, discuss these concerns with the prescribing clinician or a qualified healthcare practitioner in a proper clinical environment. And as I say every week, that doesn't mean talking over the back fence, and it doesn't mean going down to your local health food store and just having a quick chat, because they don't have the time just to totally assess your diet, lifestyle, any potential drugs and interactions with what they might recommend, and certainly not someone who's just taken on the latest MLM franchise. Okay, this week, show 6, the DASH diet, voted as one of the best you can possibly do, so we'll touch a little bit on that. Household chemicals, potentially lowering your child's IQ, maybe I've had some too. Does your blood need sunscreen? Pharmacists to prescribe antibiotics. This is an interesting one coming up. And if we've got time for a little bit of what in the weird, come across a pretty weird one, so stay tuned right till the very end for that. Alright, the DASH diet. I don't know if you've heard of it in the past, it's been around for a fair while. But DASH, D-A-S-H, stands for the Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. So this was primarily put in place to help people with elevated blood pressure. Like we know, they dish out high blood pressure tablets like Aspros these days, because the guidelines have pushed it down that you should be 120 over 180 regardless of age, basically. And that's what they're targeting for, and certainly nothing over 139 over 90. And these do change every now and then too. So they have found that over the years the DASH diet has been found to help lower blood pressure and prevent heart disease. And because heart disease, I believe, is still the biggest killer of people in the Western world, this might be just the clever thing to embrace into your lifestyle. It emphasises foods that are low in sodium and high in potassium. And this is another thing from a nutritional perspective. We often find that if we push people's potassium up, we can actually help reduce their blood pressure. Similarly with magnesium, that can help push blood pressure down a little bit too. The comment on sodium, that's a bit of old info, unfortunately. They were finding that both humans and rat studies, that those that excreted the greatest amount of sodium tended to have less cardiovascular events. So you can have your salt as long as you're peeing it back out. What do we got? We need to talk about proteins and fibres, green leafy vegetables, fruits, whole grains, nuts, or fat-free dairy. Can't agree with you on that one. Full fat is the only way to go. And lean meats. So basically I'm pretty well on board with this sort of diet. It's good eating, it's natural. You'll notice I didn't say in there bread, bagels, whole baked goods, biscuits, any of that sort of crap. This is your basic sort of diet that your grandparents ate. And look, I'm 55 these days. When I was at school, there were very few fat kids. The talk about blood pressure pills was almost non-existent. So that lifestyle and diet that our grandparents had and passed down to our parents just seemed to be a clever way to go. But over the last 40, 50 years, we really are seeing a lot of refined and processed foods becoming mainstream in the Western diet, and it's leading to this epidemic we've got of diabetes, obesity and elevated blood pressure, and high cholesterol for that too. Anyone over the age of 60, if you rock up to your GP, they're expecting you to tell them that you're on at least one or two of those sort of drugs. And it is a bit of a shock when you rock up and go, I'm on nothing. Now, look, my mum is, she wouldn't like me to state her age, but significantly older than me, and she's on 0% prescription medications. And every time, we've known the GP for 30 odd years now, she's just impressed with that. If she has to talk to a locum, they're stunned that she isn't on some sort of prescription medication. So a healthy lifestyle can keep you off the drugs. They also talk about the DASH diet can help with weight loss, and I'd agree with that also. I think that if you have a diet just based on fruit, vegetables, whole meal stuff, lean meats, and as they say, limited sweets, they do say limited fats and oils. Look, I'm a big fan of the old olive oil. Tip heaps of it on your food. But yeah, you take away all the nasty sort of crap and you're just going to do better. And it's very similar to what I call the feeling great diet. And people just lose weight. Even if we're not trying to lose weight, they just tend to lose weight because we do tend to carry more than we need. Now, for those that were watching last week's, and we talked about the James Bond-esque Octavia diet, or Octavia diet, however it's pronounced now, I've forgotten. Whether I was saying have between 800 and 1,000 calories a day, yeah, the DASH diet says have around about 2,000 for good health. So there we go, that Octavia diet was just rubbish in spades. As I'd also said, lots of oil, don't avoid fats. You know, too much saturated fat I don't think is going to be real good for anybody, so that's why we talk lean meat. So don't eat the skin off your chicken. Cook your steak with plenty of fat on it and trim it off before you eat it, because fat equals flavour. Also helps give it a lot more tenderness too. If they're not very fatty, they're quite chewy. And always full fat dairy. Sorry, I know they say lean dairy, but there is a lot of research around contradicting that, saying we're probably worse off having the fat reduced stuff. So there we go. Well, we won't screw that up. There's actually some good stuff in that. All right. Remember the water again this week, too. Household chemicals lowering children's IQ. And it's a little bit of an unexpected one with some nasty stuff in there. Apparently there is a growing concern that modern fabrics, to the large degree, are containing a large amount of either pesticides and flame retardants, and this is having an adverse reaction on children's IQ. So much so, some US states have actually banned the use of flame retardants in some children's products. And where you might find them, stuff like your baby's car seat, that's a little bit of a worry in itself. Upholstered furniture, household electronics, even some of the food you eat could harbour toxic chemicals that are dangerous to children. The good news, they say from decades of tight legislation that poisoning from metals like lead and mercury are declining, but the amount of use of flame retardants is having a very significant reaction and response to children's developing minds. Now, when I did check this, they said the article was fact-checked. So when I read this out and cry bullshit, you'll know why, but there is a lot of good stuff in there. Researchers found that flame retardants alone caused 738,000 children, now that's a big sample group, to lose 162 million IQ points over the period of 2001 to 2016, so 15 years. Tragically, that works out to 219 IQ points per child. Well, 120 is pretty good. 150 is a standout genius, and you could count on one hand the amount of people on this planet right now that have an IQ of over 219. Clearly, they're the ones that avoided the flame retardants growing up. So we'll question just how much IQ is lost, but what they did state is that these can also have problems on brain function, kidney function, thyroid function, and hormones in general being excreted as part of development. Can also have learning disabilities, autism, and behavioural problems. And that is quite a worry when they say that these warnings have been around for a while. It's not brand new to 2020. In 2013, a study on flame retardants by Harvard Medical, and that's one of the, it's the top of the pile medical institutions. They found the same sort of problems, and in 2017 researchers at the University of California, San Francisco recommended banning all flame retardants on children's products, mattresses and upholstered furniture, and that goes into effect this year, so 2020. So there we go. Recommendations that come out of this, check labels to see if there's anything mentioning flame retardants. Obviously if it's there, some sort of barrier in between, or get rid of it, just get a freshie. Great excuse, go shopping. slip down to Super Amart or your favourite store. Yeah, replace old pieces of foam in older pieces of furniture. Yeah, just go shopping. It's cheap now. Clean dust particles with a wet mop or vacuum, and that's not a bad idea to stop it going back into the air potentially if you're just sweeping it around. Be careful if you use pesticides. Yeah, don't go spraying any of these favourite little cans and knock down your flies and cockroaches quickly. How these things work, they're actually neurotoxins, and with insects, they breathe through their exoskeleton or through their equivalent of skin, and it causes their nervous system to shut down so they don't breathe, hence they die. So fast knockdown just means they die quicker. Yeah, the problem is it's only scale is what matters here. Those neurotoxins are toxic to humans as well, so if you're spraying a lot of this crap in the air and breathing it in, it's actually really bad for you as a child or an adult. And like I said, it's all about size, so small amounts bad for kids, large amounts before it gets really bad for adults. Best answer is none. Saw something on Facebook recently, mum said, where's the phone book? Daughter's going, oh, God, you're so old-fashioned, here's my iPhone. And then she hands the iPhone back with a smashed screen and said, well, that's a good job, kill that cockroach. There we go. So phone books, thongs, fantastic. The other cool thing, switch to organic foods, because that way they're pesticide-free. As I neglected to mention, I will get the whole running of the show right one day. This program is brought to you by My Active, who generously have given me a banner to show off. So I think that's all the plugging that you need, because I don't want to run out of time like last week where I actually went a few seconds over and the camera cut me off. So, does your blood need sunscreen? Now, this is a stupid topic, and I worded it like that just for a little bit of attention grabbing, clickbait as they call it. However, the message in here is actually quite concerning. There have been 7 chemicals identified that enter your bloodstream with a single application of sunscreen. That's it, one application. Doesn't mean you have to use lots and lots of it. Now, the names are going to be the tough one. And this was basically based on a study by the Centre for Drug Evaluation and Research, which is part of the United States FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. The chemicals are, it's like, and the Oscar goes to, arvobenzone, oxybenzone, octocrylene, homosalate, octisalate, and octinosate. Okay, well, that's 6. That's not 7. Anyway, they said that the concentration of these 6 chemicals increased every single time that you applied it. And as at day 21, both the homosalate and the oxybenzone were still above the safety thresholds at 21 days later. Now, that sort of stuff is a little bit worrying because the other ones that were in there, they were still elevated after 4 days. I didn't put it on my notes, but that was in the article. So, here in the hot baking land of Australia, we use sunscreen a lot, and it is very heavily recommended as well. Because don't get burned. Getting burned is bad, and I'll say that a few times. What we want to do is be able to enjoy our lifestyle, enjoy the wonderful country that we have the privilege to live in, but without killing ourselves by getting burned and the discomfort of getting sunburned. It is no fun at all when you get fried the next 3 days. You're red, you're peeling, and your sleep's interrupted because your shoulders hurt. We've all done it as kids growing up. It was like the badge of honour to get sunburned. First sunburn of the year this summer, yeah, you're going to work on my tan. Yeah, those ideas are pretty well gone. However, we are now going into a vitamin D deficiency epidemic because so many people are covering up. They're slapping sunscreen all over, long sleeves, hats, sunglasses. They're avoiding the sun so heavily that nearly everyone we see when we get blood tests back, like in the range, it's this big, we see them in the bottom quarter or clinically deficient. And this has become such a big deal that a couple of years back, the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners wrote a letter out to their members, so your family doctor, asking them to stop running these frivolous tests for vitamin D that naturopaths keep asking for. Yeah, sorry guys, that didn't make the deficiency go away. That's just sticking your head in the sand and saying, well, there's a deficiency. Everyone's deficient in vitamin D, so what? Why would we test for it? Because if you go looking into what vitamin D is good for, there are dozens, if not hundreds of functions facilitated by vitamin D in the human body, and the International Vitamin D Council, get on their website and have a look around. They're publishing stuff all the time where low levels of vitamin D have been associated with numerous health conditions. We know autoimmune conditions are very heavily linked. Stuff like MS in particular, very interesting one. The further we get away from the equator, so moving out like this, both north and south, the incidence of MS increases. So there is definitely a vitamin D link in there. So those at the higher and lower latitudes obviously get a lot less sun, and there is a lot more incidence of MS. What the link is, we don't know, but certainly that is a point that plenty of people have been talking about for decades now. Take a vitamin D supplement, you know, it might actually save you. Yeah, and the take-home message from me with this one, if it is so safe, well, if sunscreens are so heavily recommended, why aren't they safer than this? And I really blame you, government. You've really gone off half-cocked with the cover-up, with the sunburn message. You should have gone up with the cover-up message a lot more. Those rashes that we've got, they're fantastic. You can go out and play all day and not get burned. Hats are great. But sunscreen might not be the wonderful thing that we've all made it out to be. But always be sun smart, don't get burned. So as soon as you start getting pink, that's it, make sure you are covered up. There we go, 16 minutes, doing well. Alright, here is a trial for Queenslanders. Yeehaw, my backyard. It's about to begin in March that they're going to trial pharmacists. So your local chemist, he's not a chemist, he's a pharmacist. There is a big difference. Ask a chemist, and chemists may actually get quite irate. They go, no, they're pharmacists, they're not a full chemist at all. They're going to be allowed to prescribe antibiotics for urinary tract infections. Part of the reasoning for this is that the UTI is not selective when it comes on, and plenty of women have had to delay getting any sort of treatment because the GP was closed, and that could be late at night, you know, it could be over weekends and they can't get in to see someone as quickly as they'd like. Well, gee whiz, you start playing in a GP's backyard and don't they have a little hissy fit about this one. Doctors claim it will be a disaster with an exclamation mark, so it must be true. Responding to the trial's announcement over a year ago, the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners said in a statement that pharmacists do not have the healthcare training required to safely deliver healthcare services. Man, isn't that a kick in the nuts? I always thought that pharmacists were pretty switched on with their drugs because they're a bit of the gatekeeper. You know, doctors prescribe and the pharmacists dispense, and they're the ones that go through your history very briefly and see if you might have drugs that are interacting and whether they're actually checking too much or not, going, so you've had this before, you know not to drive, or you know not to have it with alcohol, etc, etc. So these guys, I would think, might have a fair handle on it. However, it went further to kick them in the nuts. I mean, to say no amount of training other than the completion of a medical degree and specialist training would be sufficient to support autonomous pharmacist prescribing. And this is from the guys that get less than 10 hours nutritional training and tell you that they're an expert nutritionist, don't know what they're talking about, and you should go and have skim milk and what's the other crap that they like spouting? Oh yes, statin drugs are wonderful. Yeah, so the RACGP Queensland chair, Dr. Bruce Willett, who is actually a Cleveland-based GP, he said it would further contribute to the emerging catastrophe of microbial resistance. So we can even go all the way back to episode 1 of the Health Hub, where I talked about the Harvard study with how antibiotic resistance occurred so quickly in that Harvard medical study. That really was scary stuff. Yeah, well, Bruce, we've met once. It wasn't a pleasant meeting. Basically, I'd said to Bruce that I felt that natural medicine had so much more to offer, digestive health and problems and mainstream, and Bruce basically turned around, he had a pirouette, flicked his wrist and stormed off going, I don't believe and I don't agree with that at all. Yeah, shit happens, Bruce, because there's been no new drugs as far as gut health go for well over a decade. The last one that you happen to use is a herbal mixture that came out of Germany, so maybe we might just have something that we're doing better than you guys. I heard a story from someone recently. They said a friend of theirs graduated as a new doctor, and they said, My knowledge on gut health is terrible. We didn't cover it well enough. So there you go. Screw you, Bruce. Hope no one watching is a friend or patient is. Okay, so as that we continue in a world careening towards an antibiotic crisis, where everybody is saying we need to be more careful to free up antibiotic scripts is bordering on irresponsible. Well, what are you going to prescribe differently, Bruce? I ask you, what are you going to do differently? Look, let's hang on, no, there's a bit more to come out of this. Ironically, people go to the pharmacist first, usually, and they'll be counselled by the pharmacist or someone in the pharmacy and say, what you need to do is alkalise your urine, have some Ural. So I would actually go the other way and say pharmacists aren't a bad primary point for this, because they're generally going to say, try Urals first, and they will recommend the amount that they think should get over that urinary tract infection, and in a couple of days, if it's not gone or at least manageable, then they might prescribe antibiotics, where your average GP is probably going for that script pad first up. And not bagging GPs, but some are more prone in script pad medicine than others. And so the good ones certainly would be recommending Urals and alkalizers as quickly as possible. Now, that said, in my defence of pharmacists, unfortunately, in a 2019 report, the Canadian Pharmacists Journal found that pharmacists were prescribing 7 times the amount more antibiotics than physicians did for urinary tract infections. So, fairly disappointing there after I came to your support. Trial starts April, runs until 2021, so I suppose we'll just have to wait and see how that one goes. From my perspective, we'd be looking at why are they getting a lot of urinary tract infections, UTIs, let's go with the easy term. Stuff like very acid forming diets, too much in the way of refined foods, breads are a classic in there. Have they had several courses of antibiotics prior, and that can be causing problems as well, because they do start getting a bit of antibiotic resistance in there. Think cranberry at an early stage. There is a lot of research in there on cranberry and the chemical D-mannose. It makes the lining of the bladder quite slippery so that the bacteria can't adhere in there, and out they come. So that is a fantastic starting point. I would personally take that with an alkalizer. Like I said, brand name Ural is one that would do it. We know that Australia is massively, epidemically deficient in iodine consumption, and iodine is so cool because it is a fantastic antibacterial that 90% of what we ingest should be excreted. So those with optimal iodine status, you pee out the vast majority of what you ingest. That happens to go through your bladder, kills up any bacteria, and if you're taking cranberries, it works a treat. And that's the approach I've had with several patients over the years, where they've had recurrent UTIs and many courses of antibiotics, and it's causing a lot of other damage, especially gut stuff. And we've taken that approach with the appropriate dose. Don't self-prescribe. That's how you hurt yourself. So we've taken the right amount, and we've had sensational results. So is it going to be a disaster? I suppose we're just going to have to wait and see for that one. Screw it up again over the shoulder. Fantastic. 23 minutes. We got a bit of time. It's a half-hour slot. What in the weird? Now, I'm going to bring these as often as I can. I've got an absolute cracker in the coming weeks for Viagra, so if you know anyone, tell them to tune in. What in the weird? This was from America. A poor soul called Crystal Coombs. She had a chunk of her cheek torn off by a pit bull when she was only 9 years old. And what they did, they took a skin graft from her groin area. You can see where it's coming. See where it's going, sorry. And they put that on the cheek. However, she hit puberty and started growing pubic hairs from the skin graft on her face. Damn shame. So she was appearing on an episode of show, Botched. And this is where Darwinian stuff. She said she's more self-conscious than ever since becoming a mum. Don't know why it changed. The doctors actually said, well, they sort of did the right thing, because the structure of the cheek and nose and eye is very similar to anatomical structure, critical anatomical structure in the groin area. So they sort of did the right thing, we would think, at the time. But no one really thought that, puberty will kick in and she'll start having a little patch of curly hair on the face. And she gave a nice close-up in the article too. Yeah, and why that's a big deal is because she went on to say, since having my daughter, I started to get really conscious of it. I'm worried about the kids she'll go to school with and I don't want her to be teased. So I'm going to go on national television and international media, show off these little curlies growing out of my cheekbone and tell everyone that it was a bad thing. Well, yeah, that has since been corrected for her. They've taken some tissue from somewhere else. They used a bit of saline to pat it back out, and actually the graph looks better than the original and without hairs. Well, as I say, that's the news for this week. Thank you for tuning in. If you like it, certainly do the thumbs up, share it with your friends, because hopefully we've been able to give a little bit of information that might help them have a better and healthier life in, I'm hoping, also an entertaining way, so it's easier to take that stuff in. Well, until next week, be kind to a stranger, because you never can tell. One day that stranger just might be you.